Um, okay, we're closer to the end of Perek Mem Beis. Okay. We are okay. We're gonna start quickly from the third line from the top. Okay, and then we learned a few more lines. So he's saying like this: the lower level of fear that every Jew could possess, you just have to reveal it, okay, by meditating and breaking the evil, he says. So you reveal a level of fear of Hashem that is enough to get you to do mitzvahs. Not a lofty level, but it's enough to get you to do mitzvahs. So on page 226 at the bottom, Samach Aleph on top. And he says that just like a physical king, like Rabbi and Zaki told the students, you should fear God at least as much as you fear a king. And what are you fearing the king? When the king is sleeping, you don't fear him. That king you also don't fear. What are you fearing? The life of the king. The king's life is what you're fearing. And he says, what's interesting, the panim is the chayusi, this life of the king that you're really fearing, again, not the body of the king, the king, the life of the king. It's not even something you see. You know that he's alive, but you don't see the life in him. You don't know what it is. You see him alive, and that's what we fear. So he says, if that's the case, we might not see God, but we see God functioning in the world. It says, in Kain Kocha Mamish, the same way. Yesh leiros Hashem, you have to fear Hashem. By seeing even the physical eyes, you see what's going on. Bashamayim over it's in the heaven and the earth. The chotzvam, all the hosts, all the planets, all the stars and everything else. That God is in them to give him life. So he's saying like this: when we fear a king, we fear the life of the king, the existence of the king. He says the same thing with Hashem. Granted, we don't see him, but what do we? But again, we see Hashem's functioning. And in fact, in the parentheses and in the Haggadah over here, we'll learn it inside because it's very relevant to what we're learning. The Gam, not only that, not only do you see the functioning, but you see even more. The Gam near the B'riyah Sa'ayin, you even see physically, Shem B'Telim La'Eire Yizbarech, that the universe, the planets, the stars, the sun, the moon, everything is completely bottle subservient to Hashem. How do we see it? When they set in the west, and I'll explain this, just read one or two more lines. Like the Gemara says on the pasuk, we say this every day in davening in Vayivarach David. We say Utzva Shemayim, all the heavenly hosts, meaning the planets, the stars, the moon, everything. L'chom mishtachim bow to you. Where do we see that the planets bow to Hashem? So the Gemara says Shashchina b'mayla. Gemara says the Shechina is on the west of the world, the west west side of the world. We know, and this, by the way, we say now earlier in davening we say Hashem, the sun and the moon praise Hashem, the stars praise Hashem. In that parak, Hallelujah, okay, it goes through inanimate praising Hashem, plant, animal, and humans. Okay, and it speaks about the sun and the moon praise Hashem. Now, how does the sun and the moon praise Hashem? So it says, Utzva Shemayim Locham Mishtachavim, meaning the hosts of the heaven, the planets, are bowing to God. How are they bowing to Hashem? So the Gemara says like this. We know everything comes up in the east and sets in the west. The sun comes up in the east, sets in the west. The moon comes up in the east, sets in the west. All the planets, by the way, come up in the east and set in the west. So if you look at the rotation, the movement of the sun is coming up in the east, and he's going and he's going, and he's setting in the west. So the Gemara says that's what the pasuk in Tilla means. Utzva shemayim locha mishtachavim, because the Shechina, the divine presence, is on the west side of the world. So all the planets coming up in the east and setting in the west, they're actually bowing to Hashem. So Dr. Rebbe is saying in this comment, and this note, that not only are we fearing Hashem from seeing the function of Hashem in the world, but even more, these super powerful planets, stars, moon, sun, everything, are bowing to Hashem. And he says, V'nimtza, so it comes out, Hiluchim kol hayom, the whole day, from the minute they rise the planets in the morning, their whole day they're bowing towards the east. I'm sorry, towards the west, where Hashem is. And he says now like this. Even a guy, a peasant, that never ever saw the king. He never saw the king. He doesn't even know what the king looks like. Nevertheless, the Rabbi writes in the note, when he comes into the courtyard of the king, and they see all these choshev, prominent people, are bowing to one person, to the king. People, all of you get fear, automatically fear and awe of the king. Another thing like this. The fear that a Jew has to awaken within himself, and he says, which is enough of a fear, it's not a lofty level of fear. It's a level of fear which is enough to get us to keep mitzvahs. Okay? You don't see, but just like he gives an analogy of the king, like Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai said, you have to fear Hashem like at least like you fear a king. What are you afraid of the king? A dead king, you're not afraid of. When he's sleeping, he also doesn't know what's going on, so you're not afraid of him. When do you fear the king? When he's functioning. He said, look at Hashem functioning in the world. Okay? Hashem's functioning in the world. Not only that, but again, the analogy of a regular king, a peasant that never saw the king. He doesn't know what a king is. He walks into the palace, into the courtyard, and he sees everybody worshiping the king, bowing to the king. It's all about the king. And he thinks to himself, wow, these big officers are subjugated and bottled and nullified to the king. Wow, the king must be great. The king must be great. So what does it cause on the person? A tremendous awe and fear of Hashem. So he says, this level of fear, when you look at the world and you see the powerful sun and the moon and the planets and the stars, they're all rising in the east and setting in the west because the whole time they're bowing to Hashem. That's how they praise Hashem. How does the sun and the moon praise Hashem? By bowing towards the Ma'ariv, the western side of the world where the Shechina is. Because the Kodesh HaKadoshim was in the western part of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay. And back to the inside. Even though, that God is functioning in the world is through speech and limited speech and, all these limitations. But say, so what? There's no difference whatsoever. When there's in the fear of a king, whether he's naked, or whether he's wearing even one garment, or he's wearing many garments. In other words, okay, no, I'm saying, let's stop here. So he's saying like this. What do you think if the king is wearing underwear and a shirt and a jacket and a coat and this? You think you fear the king any less because the king's body is more covered? No. The king's body is in all these garments. In the middle of all, it's not a dummy. It's not It's a real live king. It's not fake. It's a real live king. He's covered with garments, but so what? You don't have any less awe and fear because the king is covered. The same thing he says, yeah, granted, Hashem's functioning in the world is one word, creates the whole universe. So this one word compared to Hashem is also concealed and covered. Like you said before, it's mamish covered. We have to uncover the cover. We have to circumcise the heart. He says, but so what? Bottom line is, Hashem is making the world function. That has to create within the person an awe and a fear of God. And when then you come and, like you said before, you walk into the palace of the king, you look at great tzaddikim, holy Jews, you see the bittul, the subservience and the nullification that they have to the king. That itself causes the person, the simpleton, a peasant, to also say, wow, I don't know who this king is, but he must be great. He must be great. Because look at even these holy politicians, these holy senators, congressmen, or these holy tzaddikim, lahavdil, are bowing to Hashem, so he must be great. This is enough of a yira, which exists within every single Jew, and what we have to do is just do it. And now he says like this. Elohaiker, what's the primary goal over here? He says a hergel is to do it in a constant way. Okay, the mental training, la hargel daite machshafi tamid, to train one's mind and thought in a constant way. Lias kavua believe. In other words, we got to constantly feed this fear of Hashem. It's not something you can have once a year and it lasts for the year. Or you do it once a day. It's a continuous thing. We have to revive it. You have to train yourself to such an extent that that whatever you see with your physical life, you see the heaven and the earth and everything in it. This is all an extension of God. A person, you know what Emunah is going to explain very beautifully. Emunah means belief, but Emunah has another meaning. Training. He says Emunah is not only to have the belief in Hashem, and he's going to explain it in a second. You need to train ourselves constantly that whatever happens in the world is Hashem. When a person constantly becomes aware within themselves, it's all Hashem. Baruch Hashem, thank Hashem, everything Hashem. Then the person trains himself that this is their nature, that Hashem is always there. In a visible way, to a certain intellectual visible way, an emotional visible way, that we know there's a world, like Avraham Avinu, these week's parshas. He realized there's a God. If there's a world functioning, there got to be somebody that made it. By days a yisker tamid, and through seeing the external level of the world, realizing that what makes the world function, it's Hashem. So yisker tamid al pnim Yosef v'chayusam, and they'll come to understand and feel the real essence of the life of Hashem. And he says like this: this is what the word emuna means. Emuna literally means faith. But he says, you know, a craftsman is called an uman. Same letters. Uman, emuna. What does a craftsman mean? Why is a craftsman called uman? He says, Shuloshin regilus. Okay, the word the root aleph mem nun is accustoming yourself. Shemargil ha'odem esatmi, a person trains himself that this becomes his habit. Kumei uman, like an expert. Hama'am in yadav, like a craftsman who trains his hands. How does a person become an expert? Okay, you're a carpenter, yeah? How do you become a good carpenter? You constantly train your hands how to do the job. And it becomes like second nature. It becomes like a habit. But then you're a good craftsman. So the Alter Rebbe says like this: the Amunah, the faith of a Jew, it's not enough that it's superficial. It's not enough that I believe in God. He says, in order for that Amunah to affect our day-to-day living, and this is what Hashem is asking from every Jew. Hashem is asking Kiyam Liyira, just to fear him. Hashem wants this Amunah to be trained constantly, like an Ummah. Ma'am and Yodav, he trains his hands constantly. A good worker lives with what they do. You want to know if a guy's a good worker, if they love what they're doing, then why do you love what you're doing? Then you become, like we said, love means you become one with it. You become one with it, you train yourself because this is what you love and this is what you feel. And therefore I'm going to keep training myself until that gets done. So here is an interesting addition to what Alter Rebbe is defining the word emunah. Emunah also means uman, which means an expert in his field who trains his hands. It also means amen. By the way, these are all the similar words. Amen, emunah, uman. These are all the same thing. It's continuous belief in a way that it's true. What do you mean it's true? It's not sometimes like this, sometimes like that, sometimes with this, sometimes that. It's constant. It's always the same way. That is the amunah that a Jew says, that a Jew has. And he says 4 lines to the end of the page. Gam liyes lizikaron tamid, and you also have to keep in mind constantly. Losh and Chazal, but the Chazal, the sages tell us that Kabbalah's Malchus Shamayim, acceptance of the yoke of heaven, which is an obligation upon every single Jew, is similar to same Tasim Alecha Melech, to place the king over you. What does that mean? Place the king over you. He says like this: because when a person connects to Hashem, what he does is maniach esal yenim v'tachtenim. Hashem leaves the higher worlds, the lower worlds, and where does he connect? Umeyachid malchusei aleinu, and God unites His kingdom with us. Now, the Rebbe in Tanya, in a different place, says this just a little bit more open, so to speak, and clearer. You have a very powerful king, not a dictator, a king that people love. And you can imagine one day the king says, there's millions of people in the country. He says, I'm going into Yankel the tailor's house. I'm going to pay him a visit. You can imagine the simcha of the simple Jew, Yankel the tailor, the simple Jew, that what is it? Hashem is, so to speak, forgetting about the whole country, and he's coming to me. You can imagine the simcha that the person has. Now, the Rebbe is saying over here, that's exactly what happens when a person has this emunah and he's training himself to constantly do it. Because when a person has emunah and emunah causes him to do mitzvahs, what happens when the person does a mitzvah? Hashem leaves, and that's what I've been saying it here and other places in Tanya. Hashem is leaving, so to speak. He's leaving the whole universe, and he now becomes Yichud one. Because when a Jew does a mitzvah, they become one with Hashem. They become one. Hashem is coming to me, and only me, and he's becoming one with me. Another Jew does a mitzvah, Hashem is leaving everything and now coming to that individual person. And as Alter Rebbe explained earlier in Perek Chafei of Tanya, Alter Rebbe said, Yichud Zeh L'mayla, this unity that a Jew has with Hashem, you do a mitzvah. A man puts on tefillin, a woman lights Shabbos candles. Okay, they're doing mitzvahs. This unity with Hashem is nitzchi le'olam v'oed. It's not that at 7 o'clock when I put on tefillin, or at 6 o'clock when I lit the Shabbos candles, that's when I'm becoming one with Hashem. No. The Alter Rebbe says in Perek Chafei of Tanya, it's remarkable. The Alter Rebbe says, because you're becoming one with Hashem, Hashem is not limited in time. Hashem is not bound by time. Hashem is above time. And we're connecting ourselves to a level of godliness, which is above time. So therefore, what is happening? I'm doing a mitzvah. Hashem is leaving the whole world, the whole universe. He's uniting himself with me. And that unity is permanent. So you can imagine two things. Number one, the simcha, the joy that the Jew has, that Hashem's with him. And also the awesomeness, the awe that a Jew will have of Hashem. Look how powerful he is. He's running a universe. And the whole universe is one word from his mouth. You can imagine Hashem himself is infinitely greater than that. And that level of Hashem is coming down. Granted, he's wearing clothing. He's not naked, that the essence of the king is revealed. He's wearing clothing, but nevertheless, it's the king. It's the essence of the king coming down to be with me. And he says, the second two lines from the end of the page, when a Jew does this mitzvah of yirah, a Jew does any physical mitzvah, Hashem is leaving go. He forgoes the higher level, the lower levels, and he unites his kingdom. He bestows his kingdom upon us, and we accept his kingdom. You can imagine the unity. It's 1-to-1. It's not, okay, I'm a big deal. I'm one of, let's say, 18 million Jews. Can you, okay, I don't count. 1 out of 18 million, do I count? I don't count, big deal. So no. The Jew has to realize that Hashem, when you do a little mitzvah, no matter what the mitzvah is, Hashem is leaving everything in the universe. And he's coming down with unity with you, and that unity is permanent. So you can imagine the awesomeness of Hashem and the simcha that you have. And he says, and that's the inyan of Ishtachavo Shebetfilas Yutches. That's the concept of bowing. We bow 4 times in the Shemoneh Esrei. You know, first, the beginning and end of the first bracha, beginning and end of the bracha Modim. When do we bow? After we say Shema. Because the Shemoneh Esrei, the Amidah comes after Shema. So in Shema, you're accepting the yoke of Hashem. You're saying Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. This is only Hashem and nothing else. Then we come to a higher level. Now that we have Hashem with us, we have this awesome connection with Hashem. Now we could bow to him. Because now we understand a little bit the awesomeness of him. And then the bowing is a different type of bowing. It's real. Lachzor ulekabel, like you said, after we did it in Shema. So what do we do now? To go back, ulekabel b'poil, and to actually fulfill an action, the Maisa with action. In other words, like this. The real connection with Hashem is thought, speech, and action. Okay? We say in L'Chodeidi, Seif Ma'aseh V'Machshava Tchila. The end of action was in thought first. Simply what it means, Friday night, Adam Rishon was created. The last thing of creation was Adam Rishon, Adam and Chava. Sof Ma'aseh was the last thing to be created. And therefore, the Machshava Tchila, he was created first. What do you mean he created first? The purpose of creation, why did Hashem create the world, was for Adam, for mankind. So the higher the thing, the lower it falls. So therefore, the ultimate purpose of creation, the highest level, when it came down into actuality, it was created last. But in intent, in purpose, it was created first. The same thing, mitzvahs, that are action mitzvahs versus intellectual thought, thinking mitzvahs, verbal mitzvahs. When a mitzvah comes into action, which is much lower than thought and speech, that's where the ultimate unity is with Hashem. Because in the whole purpose of creation, that Hashem wanted a dira b'tachtenim, a dwelling place down here. Where is the down here? It's in thought, speech, and action. But if you're talking about more down here is in action than it is in speech, and it is in thought. Granted, verbal articulation is considered like an action, but it's not as action as actual action. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe is saying, when a Jew does a mitzvah, this yira, this awesomeness that a Jew creates, because they have it already, from Moshe Rabbeinu in us, from Avraham Yitzchak ben Yaakov in us. And now the Jew is actually revealing this level of love, enough to do Torah mitzvahs. Then that Torah mitzvahs is causing you to have a yichud with Hashem, especially in action. It's causing you to have a unity with Hashem that's unbelievably great. That itself creates the awesomeness of Hashem, that the person realizes. Okay, we finished Parak Membeis. It's almost 9 o'clock. So anyway, I wish everybody a good Shabbos. And today is Chav Cheshvan, the birthday of the Rebbe Rashab. Schose Yoga Aleinu. Mitzvah Hashem, Monday night will be the class on Zoom and in person. And everybody should have a great Shabbos. And we should only hear good news.